So I am looking at today's homework, which deals with solving quadratic equations. There's a couple of applications on this worksheet, which is the word problem, like the one that we just did in your notes packet, chapter 5. So this looks very similar to some of the problems that we've been working on, and I just wanted to work through 3 problems with you so that you had 1 problem done of each type. You can see the front part of this page has equations on it. So these are regular equations that we solved. The back of this are where the application problems are, the word problems. So I'm going to solve 2 problems on the front with you, and then I will work through one of the word problems on the back with you so that you get an idea as to how to solve the problem. So if you look at number 3, start here. So if I solve this problem, we have negative 2x squared plus 13 equals negative 43. Remember, our goal here is to isolate the x squared. So the first thing we do to isolate x squared is to try and get the variable by itself by taking the number to the other side so that we can combine like terms. That means I have to subtract 13. So that gives us negative 2x squared. And then use your calculator here. Negative 43 minus 13. That's negative 56. So now we have to do our second step. And our second step is to look at the number in front of x squared, which is a negative 2. In order to get rid of negative 2, we have to divide. So our second step is to get rid of the negative 2 by dividing. Again, use your calculator. We're taking negative 56 divided by 2. And that gives us a positive 8. Sorry, negative 56 divided by negative 2 gives us a positive 28. All right, the variable is isolated. I need to see those steps. How are you getting x squared by itself using the methods we talked about throughout the year? This is the newer part. So now to get rid of x squared, we have to take the square root of both sides. That means we just have an x, but I have to think about the square root of 28. And that has to be broken down. So let's think of the 2 numbers that multiply to be 28. One of them is a perfect square. Well, that would be a 4 times 7. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 7 makes a square root of 28. When we solve, we're taking the square root of 4, which becomes 2, and then we keep the square root of 7. The last step of solving after we take the square root is to place that plus or minus sign in front of the answer. So plus or minus goes in front of every single problem when we take the square root. And then we have 2 square roots of 7. So we're going to just go to another problem, kind of working down a little further. And we're going to look at number 9. Number 9 is different than the 6 problems above, same with 7 and 8, because these have parentheses with them. And when there's parentheses, we have to solve the problem a little differently. So we're going to try and get the parentheses by itself because that's the part that's squared. And in number 9, we need to divide by 4 to get the parentheses by itself. So x plus 2 squared, 8 divided by 4 is 20. Now we have a squared parenthesis. We need to take the square root before doing anything else. We have to get rid of that thing that's squared. So you isolate the parentheses and then you take the square root so that the square and the square root cancel. The x plus 2 doesn't change. And now I have to think of the square root of 20. What 2 numbers multiply to be 20? Well, 4 and 5 make 20. And the square root of 4 is 2. And then I keep the square root of 5. The third step is that plus or minus. So I isolated the parentheses, we took the square root, and now we have a plus or minus. The last step of this problem is to separate it into the 2 equations because that's what a plus or minus means. There's 2 answers. So one equation is x plus 2 equals 2 square roots of 5. The second equation is x plus 2 equals negative 2 square roots of 5. That's where that plus or minus comes in. One is a positive 2 square roots of 5. The other one is a negative 2 square roots of 5. And then the last step is to get x by itself. Well, if there's a plus 2 on the one side, I need to get x by itself by subtracting 2. Remember, this is that weird part. We don't actually do the subtraction because they are not like numbers. I have a 2 square root of 5 and we have a minus 2. So we're just going to write them next to each other. And I'm going to write the minus 2 first because that's the important number. It doesn't have a square root with it. And then we said it was a plus 2 square root of 5 because it's positive. Doing the same thing on the other side, to get x by itself, we have to subtract 2. So I have a negative 2, but now it's a minus 2 square root of 5. So when you look at this, you can see the two answers, one with a plus and one with a minus, which is really what we had up here. We had that plus 2 square roots of 5 and minus 2 square roots of 5. So we still have that in our answer. So that was the other type of equation that you have to solve in this worksheet. So now you have 2 done on the front. You have 7 more to do. We're going to flip over and look at the back, and we're going to try and do the same exact thing. So there are 3 problems on the back. All 3 of them are word problems, and they all deal with an object being dropped. And we are going to use the equation that was given for you, and we talked about that equation in the notes. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, California, was under construction from 1933 to 1937. 4 years to make that bridge. Now, it's a huge bridge. I've never seen it in person. I've seen it on TV, but it is a very large bridge. So, and you figure 1933 to 1937, it probably took things a lot longer to make than it would now. But a bridge that size even now is still going to take a long time to make. So a construction worker dropped a tool from a point on the bridge that was 220 feet above the water. It's pretty high above the water. So it says write an equation that gives the height of the tool above the water as a function of time. Now we're using this equation. Remember, the h represents the end height. T squared is time. The other h with the little 0 is the beginning height or the starting height. So if we look at our problem, we only have one number. The one number is 220 feet above the water. So we don't know our end height. We don't know the time. But we know that the tool is starting 220 feet above the water. So that would be our equation. So negative 16t squared plus 220, because the tool that's being dropped is 220 feet above the water. That's where it's starting. Part B says, how many seconds would the tool take to hit the water? So this is the important part in this one, because we need to solve an equation now to figure out how many seconds, which is time, it takes the tool to hit the water. Well, we have to figure out the end height. That's what this other variable represents. But we only need one variable when we solve an equation, not 2. So we have to figure out what the end height is. Well, if it's hitting the water, the end height is 0. So I'm going to take that equation and plug a 0 in for the end height. And then keeping the negative 16t squared, that's what we're going to solve for, plus 220. So it's hitting the water, or it's hitting the ground. The height of the water, the height of the ground is 0. It's fallen all the way that it can fall. So it cannot fall any further than hitting the ground or a surface or the water. So that height is 0. It's no longer above the ground, it's at the ground. It's no longer above the water, it's at the water. Now we're going to solve this equation just like we solved the ones above. So I need to get the t squared by itself. We'll subtract 220. 0 minus 220 is negative 220. Now I need to still get the t squared by itself, so divide by negative 16. Remember, this is a word problem, so you can put this in your calculator. You're going to get a decimal. So negative 220 divided by negative 16. I have 13.75. So t squared equals 13.75. So I'm just coming over here. And now I have to take the square root of both sides because I need to get the variable t by itself. So in your calculator, you're doing second x squared and then 13.75. And that gives me 3.7. It says 708, so that means it's 71. That rounds up. I'm not putting a plus or minus here because time is always positive, but I am going to label this with the word seconds. The question said, how many seconds does it take for the tool to hit the water? So almost 4 seconds. It drops 220 feet. It's going to take about 4 seconds to hit the ground. So now your job is to finish the other 2 word problems and again the other 7 problems on the front of the page. If you have questions, remember to join the Zoom sessions. So there's a Zoom session on Tuesday and a Zoom session on Wednesday. There are links to each of those on Google Classroom for each day. Have a great day.